Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of Be Freaking Awesome. I am one of your co-hosts, Sami Kinnison, joined with Angela Belford. And today we are going to be chatting with Corinna Dranow, who is a therapist and more, I would say. There's a lot more to her practice here in Northwest Arkansas. And we're going to be chatting with her about family and different things related to that. But I don't want to get too far into it and steal anybody else's show. Corinna, would you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are and your background.
Okay, professionally, I'm a therapist. I work, I'm a marriage and family therapist. So work, let's say 50% of my clients are families or marriage, or couples, I should say. And the other half, individuals. And I have a pretty wide, broad clientele that I see. A lot of my students and some, a lot of clients are from the LGBTQ community. And other than that, I'm a mother of two adults. They're 21 and 18. So we have two applying for college this year, and it's been a really stressful year.
Oh, yeah.
And that's it for now.
Yeah.
I am so excited because Corinna and I have known each other for like friend of a friend for a number of years. And so our paths would cross. And I was like, no, I swear we're Facebook friends. In December, we were at a thing. And I said, no, we're Facebook friends. She goes, no, we're not. And I'm like, yes, we are. Like, we commented on each other's posts because we have a mutual friend that we both comment on. And to come to find out, we weren't. And I was like, oh my gosh, we want to hang out. I told her about my podcast. So here she is. I'm so excited. I'm very excited to have her on because she has a different practice than I think anybody that we've had. Family systems theory is... We got into a big giant nerd fest when we hung out to talk about the podcast, and we have a lot of alignment. And there's one of our episodes that is on your attachment theory, and it does very well. It's like in our top 5. And I found out why she refers to it a lot. So that's super fun. And I really appreciate you taking some time out today to be here and also to kind of prep for, I don't know, I had so much fun when I came and hung out at your office. I'm a nerd. I go hang out with therapists. Like some people are like, therapy is bad, therapy is scary, and I'm like, no, I love when therapists will be my friend because then I can talk offline about like all the things. So thanks for being here.
Well, and if there's time at the end, maybe you can share some of what we did.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We may have to do a whole podcast just on that thing. That was fun. Anyway,
because they're so mysterious about it.
Super mysterious and weird. Anyway, but to kind of get us kick started off, the reason why I wanted to talk today is that in my book that'll be out, I feel like I said all of last year in the podcast, it'll be out later this year. It'll be out early in the spring. It'll be out later this year. I think for real, it will be out eventually. Welcome to the journey of an author. One of the things that I propose in one of my chapters is that we underestimate how many of the beliefs that we now have that we created in childhood from a little kid perspective. And interestingly, this week, 2 different people have said to me, maybe just said in a meeting that I was at, your windshield is large and your rearview mirror is small. And that's how much you should spend time like looking forward and not looking backward. And I agree 1000%. And if you just drive without a rearview mirror, it's really scary. If anybody's ever driven a U-Haul or an RV and you know that you don't have that rearview mirror and you just have those side mirrors, like it just doesn't feel as safe. And I think that if you look in your rearview mirror and notice that, wow, I seem to be pulling with my little Honda Civic a dump truck full of rocks, that perhaps maybe you could stop for a moment and let's unpack that dump truck full of rocks. And so that's why I am such a huge believer in therapy and in just taking a moment. I don't think we should spend our lives looking backwards, but when we have things that happen in our day-to-day life that give us results that we don't want, or we live out of out of alignment with who we say we want to be and the kind of person we want to be, then from my perspective, we have to pause and just say, look around and say, where is this coming from? And often it's rooted in childhood. So thanks for letting me like soapbox off. Why don't you start us off, Corinna, and tell us what is family systems theory and why did you get interested in it?
Actually, I was interested in it straight from graduate school in 1996, which is where family systems theory became kind of really popular. But when clients come in, and then I always ask them eventually questions about the family, and the typical responses, I can kind of see it very often, like, oh God, here we go. I have to talk about my family. That is so what people say about therapy, right? But the fact is, we are shaped by where we come from. And so if we understand the dynamics of the family that we came from, and by family, we talk about the people that raised you, that could be, adopted, a chosen family, it could be relatives, wherever you came from, but the system that you work with. And we always pretty much repeat patterns that we haven't resolved yet from the way we grew up. And it makes sense if you think about it. When we're born, we spent 18 or so years in that same or similar family systems, one or more. So that shapes us. That's 18 years. So if you think about it, you come in your 40s, like almost half your lifetime that you've already just from where you grew up. And then you create your own family system with partners or even children. And then you add that into the mix, and still going home for holidays, or, it constantly shows up. And the interesting thing about family systems theory, it applies to the workplace, and it applies to groups, to churches, to synagogues, to social systems. The roles we play in those places very often mimic what we've learned earlier on. So when a client comes in, I usually say, it's like, I see you here in the room as an individual, but I also see you with your entire system attached. And let's understand that a little bit better. If you want to make some changes, we have to first identify what's there.
Because the kind of cliche thing is like, blame your parents for everything. And that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is understand the water that you swam in and the water that you do swim in, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's excellent.
I've never thought about it applying to I've thought about it workplace, because we do have a family-owned business, so it deeply and directly impacts our family. But I haven't thought about it from like the society at large, or from like churches and synagogues and even clubs and organizations. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Some of it obviously depends on your involvement and how much time you spend there, but we live in a smaller area. And so our churches and synagogues or social clubs often become a place where we spend way more time with, especially if we don't have family of origin here, which is in my case. So we take on roles. You always have the people that are, they'll run to the kitchen and bring out the water and the ice bucket, or the leadership. It all affects how we run our social circles and churches. And in the workplace, if you think about it, we spend, often 8 hours with the same people every day. So we take on a role there, which is not necessarily the same role we take on in the family, but a lot of our vision and what we see is shaped by what we know from our family of origin.
That's interesting. Years ago, I would love to do it again, but we had a mom internship program. And so I had a heart for people that were stay-at-home moms that had then felt like they'd been out of the workplace for 8 to 10 years or longer, and then didn't know what they wanted to do and didn't really have the skill set. And so we did a program where you could come and intern with us for 10 to 15 hours a week, and we paid, I mean, it was a little more than minimum wage at the time. And you could learn a lot of skills. You could learn customer service, you could learn project management, copywriting, web development, graphic design. We would teach you all the parts of our business as a way to kind of expose you and kind of get you back some work experience. And here's what I didn't realize would happen. I was doing it to help them, but because we've also been a company that, like, if you don't have to have 2 years experience, like, we believe in training people, and I deeply love developing people. We've had 40 interns in the, time that I've had my business, and it's probably more than that now. But because of that, we had a very young staff at that same time frame. And what happened was that having these 2 to 3 moms a semester come in with this very young 20-something staff, where the 20-somethings are teaching the moms about technology, like, it was the most stabilizing impact. And I had not even thought about, like, what you're saying when you say we take on roles, because we definitely had a mom that, like, organized all the Christmas party and, like, made sure we had potluck, and, oh, don't forget, we're going to do a birthday party, hey, well, okay, I bought a birthday card for each person. And so now that you're saying that, at each of the different places I've worked, I'm like, oh yeah, she was kind of the office mom. Like, every office ends up with an office mom. I just never had thought about it exactly like that. That's very cool. And maybe most of my career I've been in my own business, so they literally call us mom and dad, because my husband and I work there. So,
well, and I'll say, from my perspective, there are times where in my job, I have a lot of decisions to make. And so there are days where I spend a lot of brain power making decisions and organizing things. And then I will come home, I say, because I work remotely from my home, but I'll go back downstairs. And then it's like, what are we going to have for dinner? What are we going to do with the kids tonight? What are we going to do here? And I was like, I am out. Like, I did this role at work all day long. I don't have enough capacity to do it all evening as well, to go work second shift. And I'm grateful that I have a husband we've developed a vocabulary around that, and will be like, I'm out of decision-making power today. I need to hand this off to you. And he will have the same thing on other days as well. And we'll kind of go back and forth on that. But thinking about, almost switched, of, like, sometimes the role I play at work makes it harder for me to play that manager, project manager role at home as well.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Well, and to clarify, it's not necessarily that we repeat the role that we play in our family. It's often we chose the role for some other reason that's family related. We either, like, we're missing being able to be a leader in our family because of other personalities, so we're taking it on there, or we're doing it because we're impressed by somebody else. But it usually goes back to a lot of what we grew up in and what we're still managing with until the very end. Unless you have completely cut off from your family, there's some form of influence continuously going on. So understanding it will make a huge difference.
I do think that's interesting. You talk about, especially having the connection to that, because Angela, to share some of, your background, we have talked before about, Angela didn't grow up in one family. And I think between birth and 18, he lived in four different families. And sometimes you will be like, well, I didn't have to deal with the same dysfunction for 18 years. I dealt with different dysfunction, of having to go between different families, but you also did not have 18 years ingrained in you of that.
I have, I used to tell my story in my 20s as, like, this Greek tragedy. Oh, poor me. I lived in 4 different families. And then I figured out it was, like, the greatest gift I ever had. And it is, I would say, when people say, how did you go from homelessness and hunger and poverty to the life you have today? And it is because I lived in 4 families. It is because I knew really right off the bat, when I was 18, I knew everybody was making up the rules. I knew that the systems were different in every single family, because even though I went from, a biological aunt to a biological uncle to a biological mom to a biological grandmother, so I was still in the same sibling group the whole time. They still all, even though they had all come from the same family of origin, they all were making up the rules differently. And so I think it is the thing that is my key to success. And I work really hard to help people that didn't have the benefit of such a broken childhood. No, I'm just kidding. I just think that that's a way that I've reframed it, right? So anyway, yes, I love that about I don't have a good transition to that. Sorry.
Fabulous reframe. Actually, you do have a lot of experience for sure.
Which I think that there's some people that, when you think about the idea of blended families, which is so much more common in this day and time, we have so many more non-traditional family structures that are shaping how we are raised. I think that it gives us an opportunity to really understand. Well, I think family systems theory could give us a good framework to help understand how those things shape us as well. Again, not to blame it, but do you work with people from blended family and sort of have some good guidance for how people can use that?
You are right. Almost everybody has some form of a blended family, if that means via divorce or added family members. So there aren't too many real traditional families. Something real quick that came up is, I think, Sammy, you said the word dysfunctional families, right? And I think the frame to look at that is that, is all families have a level of what we can call, struggles, right? Struggles. I almost want to call it dysfunction, but just by nature, we can't barely go on vacation with somebody for 3 days and not have some kind of struggle. So let alone living with them. And then bringing in the COVID pandemic, where we were stuck, either we couldn't see a family, we were stuck with some form of family or roommates or situation. So yes, families are a broad system. I do want to preface that, we're not going about this looking at the dysfunction, but really, I firmly believe that all parents are doing their best, giving the tools they've had at that moment in time when they were parents. Like, I really believe most parents love their children or would like to love their children if they had the capacity to it. And are trying to do their best to be a good parent. So it's not looking at it from a dysfunctional model, but it's looking at it from growth model.
What's the benefit of approaching therapy from a wellness model versus a dysfunction model?
Well, figuring out what our family strengths are. This is what we want. We don't want to get rid of everything that we are and who we are and act. We want to eliminate some of the symptoms, anxiety, depression, and things like that may come from some of that. But we want to keep all the things that we learned that are strength based. Most of the time, when people are hurting, when they come into therapy, they're hurting. Something is, or they're in a crisis. So at first, it's a lot of times all they can see is what happened in their family that created them to who they are or how they act today. But then after a while, once we've kind of gone through that, it's easier. Like, once we've worked out the negative parts, it's easier to focus. But I also learned this in my family, and I learned this. And like you, Angela, just said, is if you're exposed to people that can't show their physical affection, or so you can maybe that's what you're longing for the most, and that makes you really love language, physical touch kind of partner, or it turns the other way around. But so identifying the strengths is so helpful in growing.
I agree. something you said reminded me, people will ask me from time to time, like, how do you think we solve poverty and break the cycle? And I say, you have to show people something different. And I love the people there's some efforts in Hollywood to really, this idea of, if I can see it, I can be it. And so I think exposing kids to different ways of being, even if they are in the same family structure, but being able to see other families function. It's interesting because there's this weird blend of, like, if I'm trying to raise my children and my teenagers to be fantastic and amazing humans, and then they, there's this kid that they feel like they're a bad influence, that kid could be a bad influence. Like, how do you navigate that as a parent? That was always a struggle for me, to be like, I want that kid to get to see something different, and to see that they don't have to be a bad influence to get attention, and they don't have to do these things. But then there's this slippery slope of worrying that your kid is going to kind of go down the wrong path. Anyway, sorry, lovely ADD moment there of just thinking about how to apply this when you're raising your own kids, and how you can, like, expose them. Because if you live in whatever bubble, so whether you are in poverty and you live in the poverty bubble, or you live in wealth and you have the wealth bubble, and your kids never see anything different, then it's just an incomplete picture of what life can be like.
Okay, there's so much in there.
Sorry.
So the thought that there's some bad influences, I kind of reframe that into, those are exposures that are different from, that's how you frame it for your kids. Like, yeah, this is not what we do in our family. That might be okay in their family or in their life. It's not okay for us. So you set a strict or straightforward expectation what your family norm is. Now, that doesn't mean that the kid isn't interested in learning what or copying what other people are doing. So I think just, all right. It goes into a lot,
There's not a good answer.
Yeah,
Sorry, there's not a short answer. It's just where my brain went to.
Obviously, like, communicating with them, but also verbalizing, this is what our family does. And yeah, we yeah.
I want to come back to something that you said earlier about, our parents are doing the best that they can with the tools that they have at the moment. I know it's been a little bit, but it keeps coming up for me.
Yeah.
Part of my healing journey from, childhood to adulthood, and this is always so interesting to have these conversations as a mother-daughter duo on a podcast to talk about my healing journey from my parents.
Yeah, because it turns out I had a lot to doing the best I could. I didn't have all the tools when she was a little kid. So
there was a moment that really impacted me whenever I was a kid. We were visiting my grandma, who was in the hospital near her death. Later, it was within like a week or two after this that she ended up passing. We were driving around. My dad was at the hospital. My mom was driving me and my siblings, and my sister was in the back seat and just like being a really annoying 5-year-old, like be in the backseat, just like would not stop talking, would not stop asking questions. And at the time, my mom ended up yelling out really loud, "Shut the F up," at all of us in the car.
Proud parent moment.
It was a really
wait, that's encouragement for all of y'all out there. Okay. Like, you can keep healing and your kid can, yes, keep going. Sorry.
So this was a really impactful moment for me because I didn't know what to do with this as a kid. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how to process this. As a mom now myself, I can look back with such deep compassion for my friend Angela, who has lost a lot of mom figures, whose longest mom figure is in the hospital, And she is the in-law daughter, the daughter-in-law, who then doesn't get to be the one necessarily sitting at the bedside. She's the one watching the kids, driving around. There's so much in that, of course. And I have a 4-year-old now, not a 5-year-old. And the number of times that I want to yell, shut the F up at my 4-year-old, like, it is overwhelming at times, the questions and the noise, especially whenever you like, and I don't have anything traumatic going on a day-to-day basis. And so you deep breath, receive his energy and do all of that. And so there's such compassion that in that moment, I fully 100% that my friend Angela was doing the absolute best she could with the tools that she had in that moment, that facing all of those things, even though Sami at 11 was so confused by what was happening, Sami at 28 can look at that moment in my past and be like, wow, that is hard. That is so hard. I can't imagine. Anyway, it's been a part of my healing journey to look at moments like that from my childhood that impacted me deeply and able to look back with compassion to know that my mom was doing the best that she could with the tools that she had. Sorry if I'm making you tear up, Angela. I don't.
Sorry,
Well,
I'm trying not to, but yeah. Yeah.
Can I speak to the mother-daughter podcast for a second? Because I'm listening to your podcast, which I absolutely adore and love. The having the two of you talking so candidly and openly about your history, and you, Angela, being able to laugh about it and validate her experience, but also take it with a lighthearted. I've observed that in all the other podcasts too. It's beautiful, and it's really inspirational for us to heal. And it's fabulous role model to some of the role modeling to some of the listeners, where you can get at if you do the work. If you look at your family, if you look at all the woundings and things that happened, that at the moment was that yelling at the moment was scary, and maybe you didn't understand it, or even somehow traumatic. And yet to look back at it and then come back and have compassion. And my kids are, 18 and 21. And I keep thinking, okay, I hope when by 25 and the brain's starting to be grown, that some of my mishaps will be forgiven. So I think we can all hope that. And the other thing is, I do not think there is a single parent that has not yet either yelled at their kids or reacted emotional or out of in the moment, their amygdala was on fire, their nervous system was activated and whatnot, and they would have a reaction that's
it's so normal.
So normal.
It is so normal. Well, and you know what Sami is facing right now, the 4-year-old asking 1,000 questions, and it is one of the greatest efforts of self-control to keep a very sweet, loving face when she's going through that and just going, I know, honey, that's so hard. And my husband and I, we will leave her house and we'll just laugh until we cry, because we literally feel her pain, because she was that kid that asked questions. I've told the story, I've never wrote but at that point, I was too busy raising little kids to the legislatures until that was the time they were thinking of moving the kindergarten start date up to September 1st. And I wrote everybody. I didn't care if you were my legislator, no, you cannot do that, because my kid was born September 9th. I don't know how to answer the questions. I don't have the brain capacity for one more year, because I was pregnant too when she was going. So I was 2 months away from my due date. I needed her to be in kindergarten because I had no capacity. I also try to give myself compassion that you mentioned your brain fully forming by 25. I had 2 children before I had a prefrontal cortex fully formed. That's insane to me. It is absolutely insane. And I say all the time, actually, a year or so ago, they were all the ages that I was when I had children. So my youngest was 21, which is how old I was when I had Sami. My son was the same age I was when I had him. And then Sami was 26, which is the age I had our third kid. And they were all like, oh, we My son was like, I can barely keep myself alive, much less two other humans. And I think that was a moment that my kids got a lot of compassion. If they don't get compassion when they get a prefrontal cortex, having children, you still have time. Because once they have kids, then they're like, oh yeah, your life was hard. Yeah, okay, I get it now, and anyway, so family systems, just figuring it out and reviewing them.
Well, and so there's also the part, and what you fabulously role modeling it to is that there's change. Families still change and family dynamics change. And that's sort of the hopeful part, and the positive part of looking at your family from a wellness model is like when one person in a family changes, which is in my case the client, then the entire family changes around it. Not at first, very often. So I'm explaining the family systems theory for a second, a little bit there.
Yeah.
But the idea is homeostasis, right? A family functions in one way, and there's a draw that everybody holds on to their family roles. Like there's no tomorrow. Like it's so hard to change your family. And then somebody goes to therapy, and all of a sudden they're learning to individuate, they're learning or differentiate, like separate themselves from the family, and that affects the family. And so there is a pull to go back to homeostasis. So people will protest the change. They'll have all kinds of reasons, or they'll desert you for a while, or you desert your family for a while because the families don't want to change. But I can tell you, in the long run, the dynamics will change. People always grow, and families change. So to give them a chance. And there's a lot of wounding, and like my mom's always been that way, and she'll never change. And that might be true if you really look at it with a fine, look at it closely. But some family dynamics will also change and give people a chance to grow.
So
you're growing.
So it sounds like, and this is, I think, one of the things that's detrimental to therapy is that you go to therapy and you start acting differently with your family. Maybe you start to learn how to put boundaries up. And in that phase, when you're the most, I don't know what to say, but that your growth is so embryonic. Remember, we all did the little, green bean pods when we were kids trying to grow this new seed, and you're in this embryonic phase. And now you get all of this like attack, I say in air quotes, because the family doesn't like it that you're changing. And so what you're saying is hold on, have faith, keep to the boundaries, keep to your journey, because you will get stronger and they will adjust to the new reality. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying, right?
I have a friend right now who she started therapy late last year, and she has a pretty toxic family relationship. It's been very detrimental to her in her adult life. And one of the sort of challenges that she took from her therapist was to take 1 month and not spend time with her family. Her family it was very overbearing for her, the amount of time that they spent. And so she had 1 month where she did not answer their phone calls. She would call them back later, but she never answered on the first time. And she did not see them in person. And I was like, how did that go? And she said she has never felt more peaceful than in that month. She said, now, don't get me wrong, they are all very mad at me, and I can tell that they're very mad at me.
With the text messages.
And I have never felt more at peace in myself and in my day-to-day surroundings. Like I can already feel a stabilizing. She was like, so I think, she was like, this is good, which I'm so grateful for her that in the midst of the attack, she can still see the light at the end of the tunnel already within her own growth of holding those boundaries is leading to a very positive impact right away. And so that's not to say that she's like, oh, I'm never going to see my family again, but let her stabilize in her sort of new view of herself. And then when she feels a little bit stronger with that, it can be a little bit easier to sort of approach that. But yeah, I like the embryonic idea that sometimes it's just like, it's not that it's fragile, but it can be
Mhm.
fragile. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was not, sometimes it's really necessary to separate from the family, and sometimes for years,
Mhm.
sometimes even forever. But for the most part, what I was saying is there will be eventually change, but even if it takes decades, there will be change somehow, or at least API assume positive intent that people will try to change, and just might still not have the tools to at that moment in time. But in a lifespan, there is lots of opportunity for growth.
Right.
Talking about emotional cutoff real quick, because that's another term that comes from family systems theory, is that sometimes the pain in the family is so big, like you
Mhm.
called it toxic, or that that we sometimes might have to cut off. So looking at my own journey, is I came to America when I was almost 21. I'm 55 now. So I left what from the outside was a very, very loving family. Like, a lot of people admired some of that love we had, but there was also so much dysfunction. I couldn't stand being close to them. So I moved all the way across the country. But
From
at
Germany?
Germany,
Yes.
and never left, pretty much. But at the time, I didn't understand that's what I was doing. But I did realize the moment I had left and moved to San Francisco, and that there was a lot more of an open mindset, the culture was different, and I felt so much more at home. So I'm not saying that sometimes it's what we have to do is doing some kind of, and for me, that was an emotional cutoff, because at the time we didn't have FaceTime, and, I just had the pay phones, and it was expensive. So, and I could write letters, but I didn't have that same emotional connection, ability to continue my family connection. So sometimes it's what we have to do is to separate for a while and take a breather and experience that peace, just to regain some strength, or to solidify the new identity we're forming, right? Like, so sometimes it's good to just separate and then give yourself some time to grow and become a newish, renewed person, refreshed with new energy, before we go back and face the family stuff.
Talk to us a little bit about identity, and how important is that in the journey as we are kind of assessing our family systems?
Ooh, identity. That's another big question, but it's really hard sometimes. We have a role in the family. For me, I was always like the very sensitive one, and I'd cry, and my brother was the parentified. He was, taking care of me as his brother, and I'd look up to him, and it was a little hard for me to form my identity while I was still living at home and being so close. So once I moved, like, literally across the world, I had time to grow and go to therapy, and went to therapy school then. And there's a lot of work that's done in therapy school on yourself, for sure. So identity. So our roles and our identity in the family is huge, and it also is very, very triggering. So if I'm out at work or in the community, and there's somebody who would say takes on the role of my brother, on one hand, I just want to fall in love with them and say, I love you like a dad or a big brother. But on the other hand, they trigger me and trigger the old me. And I crawl back into my old role that I was, let's say, like with my adult brother, right? Like being the sensitive little sister. So now recognizing when I don't now fall into that role really anymore, but for a growth period of time, like, recognize, oh my God, I'm acting like the little sister right now, is really helpful, just to know that.
I've talked to people that are like, oh, well, I wasn't the smart one, I was the pretty one. or I was the party one, or I was actually, when I went to visit one of my friends over Christmas, my freshman year, her family was like, now, Angela, which one are you? And her little sister goes, she's the party one. And I still harass the little sister to this day. And I'm like, I mean, I kind of was, but also, it was interesting to see how even that my friend group, we get kind of categorized into a role and not really realizing it, and talking to people that are like, I wasn't the smart one, I was the pretty one. And then if I was the pretty one, and then suddenly I have something happen where I don't think I'm pretty anymore, it can really, like, I've seen people really get like over obsessed with their looks and they're not even seeing that it was because of that identity. And like the sensitive one, or I'm the shy one. There's so many different things. If you notice that and just decide, is that really true? Do you really want that to be who you are going forward? Because I think it's beautiful that you're sensitive. And what a great thing that they were saying as a child, they were recognizing what your life's work was going to be sensitive to others.
Well, I had just had an epiphany. I made a connection that I haven't made in my life before, because I don't really talk much about my relationship with my brother. It wasn't that traumatic, but it was. But I think this is my family role. This is really funny that it took me to become 55 on a podcast, but my family role is why I became a counselor because of my sensitivity, but also the part that I didn't. I mean, that part I knew, but the part that I just made the connection is that I was always admiring my brother, he was the one that had all the answers. Like I said, I was parentified. He was taking care of me. We didn't have a dad in the picture. And like, I became a counselor so I can be like him.
Oh,
But then there's the part of him that always bothered me, which is he's like excuse me, Frank, if you're listening, but a know-it-all. Like he always gives unsolicited advice. And that was the first thing I had to learn in my profession. It's like, I don't, not to become my brother and give unsolicited advice.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
So I'm just making this connection here, which is fun. But
awesome.
We have talked before. We're like, it's sort of, sometimes you get live therapy here on the podcast. This is not the first time.
Josh used to accuse me all the time of the reason why I was friends with therapists, so I get free therapy on the podcast. And I'm like, no. Well, I mean, it's just a nice side benefit. Anyway.
One of my best friends is a therapist, and there are sometimes after conversations, I'm like, you should bill me for that. And she'll laugh and she'll be like, it would be unethical. And that's like her joke. Like, I would, but it would be unethical to bill you. Like,
that's why I said I feel like I should have been the one to be able to buy a ticket to be on the podcast.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay.
Corinna, is there anything that you want to sort of leave us with today? Any idea or thoughts that you have?
Well, I just talked about sibling position, which is another family systems thing. We all know the hierarchy, so to work that out.
Just to make sure if people don't know that, you're talking about how you act as an oldest child, a middle child, the baby, where you fall in sibling order can impact how you show up in the world.
Yep. Yes, hugely. But I think the last like one of the concepts that show up all the time is it's called triangulation. It's a family systems term. And the idea is, for example, a couple comes in and having issues and there's a third in the triangle, and to figure out what the third is. And in that, like in one case might be an alcohol. And so to realize that the third, alcohol, or that could be an acting out child, or it could be some kind of other addiction, is that gets between the couple, and becomes a triangle. So the entire struggles that couple have is focused on that third thing, the addiction, as a triangle, and that gets between the actually members of the couple solving the issues that they have with each other. They're too much focused on the money or the third piece in the triangle. And to be aware of that. And so now we're talking about the family of creation right now, right? I'm not talking about family of origin where we came from. But so when you're in part of a couple and there's the third in there, to work towards moving that third corner of the triangle out to the outside and refocus on what's actually really going on between the two of them. And because especially with alcohol and addiction, it becomes so intense and so focused on it. But there's also other little things, constant struggles, even about one of them being a workaholic or so. So it's like when you notice that the third in your couple's relationship, to de-triangulate, to get the third part of the triangle on the outside so you can reconnect. And so a lot of that happened in our family of origin also. When you think about like the rebel child acting out, it's only acting out because the parents are not communicating with each other, in one example. I don't know if I explained it.
Yeah. No, that's cool. No, I like that.
What's interesting, I have at times had a different perspective, but I could see how like it both could work. My husband and I have talked about, we want to try to fight on the same side of an argument against something else. And so like, what is is it division of labor in the household? How can we work as a team against that versus standing on opposite ends, working against each other? But that still then is us reconnecting with each other so that we can address this thing.
Exactly.
Even though it still is a little bit could look like a triangle, it's really these two dots coming together to address the other thing. Because when we fight against each other, we sort of joke, and we talked about it on the podcast with him, that when we fight against each other, sometimes it's lose-lose. Even if I win the argument, I still end up losing because the person that I care about the most lost. That's a lose for me. So anyway, that figuring out how you can reconnect and then address it.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And so really working on the connection, the emotional connection with the other person first before you take on the outside issue that you argue about, even cleaning the house. It's like, keep it on the outside of you. It's like you and me against the world, or
the problem.
Yeah, let's be on the same side.
Yeah,
I love that. Good example, Sami.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that.
Good job managing it that way in your family.
Oh yeah, we've done marriage therapy. We have
marriage therapy that's emotionally focused therapy. Woo,
yes,
big shout out for EFT.
Yep.
And the work. So
and the
work. Well, and good job for going to therapy early in the process, so you don't have years and years of baggage and struggles to work through, and hurts most of all. So good work.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes when some people think about, I'm going to go to marriage therapy, you might think about it as like, this is the last ditch effort to stay together. And I'm not saying it is too late, but it almost is, if you're waiting until like this is the last straw, the last chance to stay together. And so there was a moment in our relationship a couple of years ago where we were not happy with where things were. And I was like, I'm not saying that we're going to be splitting up right now, but if we continue on this path, several years down the road, I can see us in a very different place where we're going to need to be considering this. Let's address the problem now while it's starting, like while we're starting to diverge before it's been years of this. And I think it really made a difference for us. Like, it was not a crisis moment to go to marriage therapy. It was like, no, we're going to be heading in the wrong direction if we continue without some type of support. I was really grateful for how open Chris was at the time to do that. It helped a lot that I was also coming to terms with my postpartum anxiety at the time. I had also, like, I had just admitted to him that I had been suicidal for several months. And so his openness to do anything, he was like, I'm in. Like, you say we need to do it, let's go. Like, I am all in for helping you, helping us. It really set some unfortunate context at the time, but also like a good motivator of like, no, we really want to make this better and turn it around. And here we are 3 years later, it's really turned around.
So I often, this is fabulous, like Chris went, like, suggest, like, look at it from like, let's go in for a tune-up. We're not going in because we're in this distress, but we're going in for a tune-up. And also to just dedicate an hour to the message that says, okay, I'm going to spend an hour a week just to work on improving things and tuning up the relationship, not to fix what's broken, but to fine tune and tune up. I would like society to move away from marriage, family. Oh my God, they're having trouble. Are you guys getting a divorce? It's not the ideal to come in when you're in distress. The ideal is to come in early on. So heads up.
Yeah, well, because we just were saying, I mean, I'm just sitting here, Sammy's like, you look concerned, are you okay? Yes, I'm just seeing this, like, it's like pop rocks in my brain right this second, because what we said is parents are doing the best they can with the tools that they have. And so why are we treating marriage therapy as this, you have to wait until you need a hazmat crisis intervention? If you have a marriage and you are not parenting, you're having results that are not the very ideal results that you want out of your life, why would you not go get more tools? We're doing the best we can with the tools we have. Your toolbox is lacking. You need some more tools. So this is simply, marriage therapy is not a reflection. Therapy in general doesn't mean, and I hate this in our society, that therapy, I think we're getting better, but therapy means I'm broken. Right. And it's like, no, I'm telling you, after COVID, I don't know many people that have enough tools in their toolbox to cope with all of the aftermath of COVID, all of the just loss and reintegration. We all need more tools in our toolbox. And so I think that is, well, that's what you were saying, Sammy, is we didn't have enough tools. We got to go stock up some toolbox. Love
and
that.
So to summarize that and pull that back in the entire podcast idea about if you can take family members into therapy too, and but most of the time their understanding is that we're in trouble. So, but to say, hey, I just want us to have more fun together. But the bigger picture is like, you want to have family issues, struggles, or couples issues or parenting suck the life out of us. And we cannot be the best in our workforce when the life is sucked out of us. And in an ideal version, you should be coming home and being able to just let go emotionally and fall and let your partner catch you. But if you have to come home and then continue the fight, it's hard to be your best in your work or your congregation, your social system. So working on the family system that sucks the life out of us early on is,
it really will make the world a better place. That's what we're here for.
I think this is a really good note for us to end on. So Corinna, if people wanted to get in touch with you, learn more about your work, or maybe even work with you, is there a way that they can do that?
Well, the best thing is to just Google me and find me on Psychology Today. Corinna Dranow, you spell that CORINNA DRANOW. I'd be happy to have more conversations with others around the family, just for the fun part of it too. If you have questions, like Angela and I did have some fun talking about stuff.
Awesome. And then we'll have to have you back so we can talk again about the sandbox and the mystery and all the things. So.
Also the IFS, internal family systems, the many different parts that we have inside.
Yes.
That's fascinating too.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to us today. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. But for now, we hope you guys go and be freaking awesome.
Thank you.